Welcome to Divcasts from University of Chicago Divinity School. For more of our podcasts and information about our terms of use, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Swift Hall, home of the University of Chicago's Divinity School, and welcome to the 2008 Alumnus of the Year lecture. The Divinity School has, in conjunction with the Baptist Theological Union, named an Alumnus of the Year since 1947. In doing so, the BTU and the school has sought to honor a graduate who has shaped a career of unusual distinction in, as the citation reads, the field of religion. The Divinity School's self-understanding throughout its history has been that we train scholars for careers in the professoriate and the ministry. The list of honorees reflecting those professional trajectories includes names such as Luking, Cole, and Buchanan, which stand side by side with Ogden, Chopp, and Lafleur. By doing so, the Divinity School pays tribute to the fact that the vocation it shares with this university, to be a teacher of teachers, achieves its realization in crucial respects beyond the confines of this building and this campus. This aim must ultimately take its bearings and receive its decisive evaluation in the work of its graduates, who really do commence in other contexts upon graduation. The occasion today is thus a wonderful opportunity to acknowledge a specific individual who has done just that, and an important annual counsel to institutional humility. The Alumnus of the Year is chosen by the Baptist Theological Union in consultation with the faculty of the Divinity School. The BTU is a unique entity in American higher education. It has a historic and ongoing affiliation with the American Baptist tradition, but it serves a non-denominational, university-related divinity school. This arrangement is a synecdoche of the values that Chicago has always represented: disinterested, excellent scholarship that is fully engaged with the lived realities of religious traditions in the modern world. The Divinity School attempts to honor this ideal in all that it does, but mirrors this unique relationship with the parallel singularity that one faculty and one curriculum serve a set of degree programs that provide scholarly preparation to students preparing for careers in both the academy and the church. While this commitment is never simple and its history is complex, the commitment remains fundamental today. The 2008 Alumna of the Year has fashioned a career that explicitly reflects these values. Emilie M. Towns is the Andrew W. Mellon Professor of African American Religion and Theology at Yale Divinity School. A 1977 graduate of the college, Professor Towns received her Doctor of Ministry degree from the Divinity School in 1982. She is an ordained minister of the American Baptist Church. Prior to her appointment at Yale, she served on the faculties of DePaul University, St. Paul's School of Theology, and Union Theological Seminary in New York. And I note with particular personal delight, as of July 1st this year, she will become Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at Yale. Professor Towns' scholarly work focuses on Christian ethics and womanist ethics. She seeks to bring to bear the insights of critical social theory and cultural studies to the social conditions of the postmodern world. She's written on health and health care, on the cultural production of evil, on the links among race, gender, class, and other forms of oppression, and on developing a network between African American and Afro-Brazilian religious and secular leaders and community-based organizations. Her books include Womanist Ethics and the Cultural Production of Evil, Breaking the Fine Rain of Death, African American Health Issues and a Womanist Ethic of Care, In a Blaze of Glory, Womanist Spirituality as Social Witness, and Womanist Justice, Womanist Hope. She has also edited 2 volumes, A Troubling in My Soul, Womanist Perspectives on Evil and Suffering, and Embracing the Spirit, Womanist Perspectives on Hope, Salvation, and Transformation. And in 2008, later this year, she will become the first African-American woman to serve as president of the American Academy of Religion. Her address today is titled The Dancing Mind. So please join me in welcoming the Andrew Mellon Professor at Yale Divinity School and now the 2008 Alumna of the Year at the Divinity School, Emilie Towns.
I really do hope it's not true that you can't come home again and again, because I was actually here about this time last year, so it's nice to be back and doing something a little different this time. And just a quick note to tamp down the confusion, because I know Clark Gilpin was in the room somewhere if he's still here, and he knows that I'm already the president of the American Academy of Religion. It's okay, Rick. Nobody understands when that transition happens, except the people it happens to. So I am pleased to say in the next annual meeting, which is in early November of this year, I get to rotate out of that august position and hand it over to Mark Juergensmeyer. So halfway there. There is a scholarly colon in this lecture that I didn't have when I was asked to turn in the title, and so the scholarly colon is this: Reflections Various of a Career and Ministry. And in some ways, this is sort of the first blush of me trying to figure out what I'm going to say during in the presidential address this fall, but it won't quite look like this, I've decided now that it's done. But there are parts that, if you're there that evening, you'll notice, and if not, just come to the dance party afterwards and have fun. I begin with a quote. One is astonished in the study of history at the reoccurrence of the idea that evil must be forgotten, distorted, skimmed over. We must not remember that Daniel Webster got drunk and only remember that he was a splendid constitutional lawyer. We must forget that George Washington was a slave owner, or that Thomas Jefferson had mulatto children, or that Alexander Hamilton had Negro blood, and simply remember the things we regard as credible and inspiring. The difficulty, of course, with this philosophy is that history loses its value as incentive and example. It paints perfect men and noble nations, but it does not tell the truth. These are sobering words for me as a social ethicist who uses social history as part of my own methodology. When I first read this insight from W.E.B. Du Bois, I found it echoed within me as much, if not more, than his famous insight, the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. I have felt the impact of his words time and again as our studied selective amnesia or willful oblivion has painted a perfect simplistic picture of a complex and fascinating nation. We are encouraged to remember the good or dwell on the bad at the exclusion of the other. And this is bad history because it does not tell the truth of the living and breathing that goes on between these two poles of the human drama. It should caution all of us in religious and theological studies of various sorts to be circumspect about our research, writing, and teaching when we veer too far one way or the other without considering what lies in between, and it is deadly for ministry. Because like history that paints perfect men and women and noble nations through selective history, our scholarship, our ministry can lose its value as incentive and example. There are many things I have taken with me over the years that I learned here at the Divinity School that echoes Du Bois's admonition. Perhaps the most important is the imperative that scholarship be rigorous, relentless, and responsible to the issues of the day while pushing my and our understanding of what is before us in our postmodern, modern worlds, and also help map out strategies for justice making and justice keeping. I will focus my remarks today on the things that I believe hold me to this task and my lifelong journey as a minister, scholar, and teacher to mature into the challenges I learned all those years ago here in this place with Du Bois as both guide and prod, and he has some friends. However, long before I came across Du Bois's words or Chicago rigor, I was shaped by two strong influences that taught me the importance of working to incorporate truth-telling in my scholarship and the potency of wisdom in my teaching. The first were the old black folks of my grandmother's generation who helped raise me, and I can still hear them now. The older black women of my grandmother's generation, Miss Waddell, Miss Rosie, Ms. Montez, Ms. Hemphill, Cousin Willie Mae. As they visited with each other, it was never called gossip. In their kitchens, front yards, beauty shops, porches, stoops were a city thing in Southern Pines, North Carolina. Sunday school classes, church socials. I can still hear them now, the older black men of my grandmother's generation, Mr. Waddell, Mr. Press, Bad Bill, Mr. Hemphill, Monkey Joe. As they sat and discussed, it was never called gossip because that's what the women did, in the barbershop, under the tree of knowledge outside the barbershop, out in the front yard or side yard tinkering with their cars, after church, during church socials. Yes, I can hear them, and you know, the only person I thought was older than these folks was God. And because they were old, I was taught they had wisdom, or should have. And they knew things that I thought I could never know because I couldn't believe that I'd ever be as old as they were because they were special. They had something that sustained them in a tightly drawn, color-lined southern and west southern pines, divided by U.S. Route 1, and money and power and privilege, from the white folks they worked for in their kitchens, yards, driving their cars, buying their groceries, tending to their dogs and horses, and carrying their golf clubs. They were a white starch shirt, best hat wearing crew on Sunday morning. And I simply loved being in their presence, sitting quietly and saying nothing so that they would forget I was there. Or did they? And do grown folks talk about life and living and losing and loving? They did not live their lives tinted by rose-colored glasses. Instead, they turned to the joy they found in the Lord and the strength they found at the altar to put their children through college if that's where they wanted to go. And love all the children in that small community because that's what grown folks were supposed to do. And in that love, they taught us more than our ABCs and our +1s and our times tables. They taught us what it meant to be wise by their actions and not just by their words. They even told us what to watch out for to tell if what they were saying was true. Evil is as evil does. Stay out of corners. Keep your legs together. That was for the girls. A hawk always circles his prey. And if one of them exhibited the negative side of the wisdom they shared, we knew it, and even failure or humanness became an occasion to learn what it meant to love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and body. Yes, I can hear them. Lord Jesus, say amen, somebody. Have mercy. Sucking of teeth and that low whistle. And I see them, proud black people who knew when to bend and not break, going to their jobs, making a way out of no way, succeeding, failing, being human all the time. But the wisdom and giving of it never left, because they believed with every ounce of their being that they had to pass on good things to the next generations. And the one thing they had that no amount of the Ku Klux Klan, patty rollers, or sheriff departments could take away, even with fire hoses and lynching trees, was what they knew about life and how to survive it, and perhaps even thrive. They had what ethicists and alumni Peter Parris calls practical wisdom. So these exemplars of practical wisdom help me keep the time beat, remind me of or teach all of us about where we've come from, so that we are not tempted to make decisions in thin air, but lean instead into the thick isness of our lives, the agonies and the ecstasies, to find our bearings for the journey. This wisdom And this way of truth-telling is not showy, but it is steady. It helps folk know how, and more importantly, what to look for in living. It brings the past into the present and the present into the future, so that we remember we are a people in time and of time, and nothing any of us does stands out of time. And this is important because we can never get away from the history that brought us here, even if we do not know it. And it is dangerous to be in a position where we cannot remember what we never knew. My second early influence is literature. Throughout my life, I've always learned a great deal from writers and poets. I speak primarily of those who do not deal with dense theoethical discourse and reflection, but writers like Toni Morrison, which sort of is on that fine line, James Baldwin, Tina McElroy Anza, Alice Walker, William Faulkner, Ernest Hemingway, Ayn Rand, Carson McCullers, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Jorge Amado, Chinua Achebe, Nikki Giovanni, Robert Frost, Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Finney. The list goes on and on. Their ability to turn the world at a tent just so, to explore our humanity and inhumanity, challenges me in ways that theories and concepts simply do not. As a child, I was transported to Troy by Homer and devoured everything I could in Fayetteville Street Elementary School library about Greek and Roman mythology. The ideas of God seemed quite novel to one who was growing up to Jesus loves me, this I know. Apollo and Athena took me out of my daily musings on Jesse Helms and fire hoses and white folks spitting. I could enter through Homer's prompting a different time and place where I learned that perhaps the holy could be capricious and not always stern. The gift and challenge of being an avid reader is that I love to read a fine writer at work. They help me see things in tangible ways and feel things through intangible means. When I turned to looking at evil and womanist ethics in the cultural production of evil, I realized that I would be bound in untenable, unproductive, and ultimately boring ways if I approached such a study solely through the realm of concepts and theories. I realized that good writers teach me that there is a world in our eye, as Alice Walker says, but it is not the only one. We can and must consider the eyes, the worlds of others. Allowing these worlds to dance or collide with one another has always caused me to grow and to change my angle of vision from the straight and narrow to akimbo. Now, Toni Morrison's image of the dancing mind is a compelling one for me in this regard, and here's her quote. "There is a certain kind of peace that is not merely the absence of war. It is larger than that. The peace I am thinking of is not at the mercy of history's rule, nor is it a passive surrender to the status quo. The peace I am thinking of is the dance of an open mind when it engages an equally open one. An activity that often occurs most naturally, most often, in the reading, writing world we live in. Accessible as it is, this particular kind of peace warrants vigilance. The peril it faces comes not from the computers and information highways that raise alarm among book readers, but from unrecognized, more sinister quarters." This quotation from Morrison's acceptance speech for the National Book Foundation's Medal for Distinguished Contribution for American Letters in 1996 focuses on the dangers, the necessities, and the pleasures of the reading, writing life in the late 20th century. She captures the dangers in two anecdotes she tells. In one, it is the danger that, in her words, quote, "our busied up, education is horse race, trophy-driven culture poses even to the entitled," close quote. In the second, she teases out, again in her words, the physical danger to writing suffered by persons with enviable educations who live in countries where the practice of modern art is illegal and subject to official vigilantism and murder. Morrison's essay, I think, is instructive for us as it is for me. Most of us have learned to survive and some to thrive in the realm of the first anecdote. Many of us have colleagues who work in countries that represent the latter. I suspect that all of us are watching where academic freedom is going in the U.S., and we may be breathing a sigh more easily come the fall. But we don't know. Regardless of where we sit and in how many places, it is in the dancing mind that many of us meet each other more often than not. It is in our research, our books and essays and lectures and papers and sermons that we often meet for the first, if not only time and way. It is this dancing mind where we tease through the possibilities and the realities, the hopes, the dreams, the nightmares, the terrors, the critique, the analysis, the plea, the witness that is done in the academy, in the classroom, in the religious gatherings of our various communities, in those quiet and not so quiet times in which we try to reflect on the ways in which we know and see and feel and do. Ah, yes, the dancing mind. As I thought through what to say about how I understand the foundations of my work over the years, I realized that when I launch into an attempt to be rational, critical, analytical, precise, and rigorous in my scholarship and teaching, I usually crash and burn if I fail to first think, why am I doing this? Why do any of us do the scholarship we do, teach the classes we do, engage in the ministry that we do? Here I am talking about more than we do the scholarship we do because we are interested in it or care about it or passionate about it or we think it is necessary. These are more than appropriate personal scholarly benchmarks in our work, but they should and must be a part of what we do when we engage in trying to understand, defend, debunk, question, cajole, illuminate in our research and writing. I am focusing more on what for me is the important first step of the dancing mind. Why the research in the first place? Because I believe what should drive our research in large measure is we are exploring traditions that have driven people to incredible heights of valor and despicable degrees of cravenness. In other words, the research we do is not a free-floating, solitary intellectual quest. It is profoundly tethered to people's lives, the fullness and incompleteness of them. And I use the image of tethering intentionally because I do not want to suggest that our work is circumscribed by the traditions we explore or not, but rather that we consciously and perhaps at times unconsciously are responding to the drama of history lived in creation, and we cannot or should not proceed as if we were engaged in ideas as if they were not related to the people surrounding them. Another way to say this is that I don't believe that scholarship is or should be an objective enterprise. Here I'm not equating objective with rigorous. They aren't the same thing at all. And I will always argue for a deep, walking, rigorous scholarship. What I am arguing against is the kind of disinterested research tack that doesn't figure in that our work is going to have a profound impact on someone's life in some way and somehow. I worry when we think that we are only dealing with ideas and concepts as if they have no heart and soul behind them. If they matter to us, they're going to matter to somebody else. And we should do our work with passion and precision and realize that we should not aspire to be the dipsticks for intellectual hubris. I'm well aware that I am arguing against some of the foundational assumptions in my training and yours, where the scientific research model and its attendant view of reality gives a solid grasp of disciplinary content and methodologies. I do appreciate and actually enjoy the ways in which Chicago formed me as a scholar and researcher to explore ideas with gusto and to trust the trail my research leads me in rather than to steer it into the lanes I'd rather travel. But the one thing I am very well aware of is that this training did not teach me how to be a scholar and teacher in the schools where I have been on the faculty. Our training hopes that we are smart enough to fit our disciplinary work with contexts as different as the religious studies department of a major university or the ministry concerns of a small Roman Catholic diocesan seminary. This is a tall order, and working our way through this is one of those vocational challenges that we may not speak of often or choose to suffer through on our own and in silence and unwisely. One place to begin unpacking this is with the mission statement or description of the aims of the department, or in the oral culture as values and ideas are repeated, statements that are set, a benchmark. The one at Yale is New England succinct: to foster the knowledge and love of God through critical engagement through the traditions of the Christian churches in the context of the contemporary world. Or its logo version, faith and intellect, preparing leaders for church and world. Statements like this provide a marvelous opportunity to use the skill we spend years building, critical engagement. The Yale mission statement challenges me to think through how my scholarships, I've only been there almost 3 years, and teaching might unfold in this environment, and why I decided I could do the academic dean's job, I have no idea after 3 years, but maybe ignorance is a virtue in this case. I also find that there's a bit of work to do to put them in conversation. But the attempt to do so may reap huge benefits. And I'm most happy to report that it is not the case that the majority of the faculty does not know that what the statement says, or that it is so ancient and unused that only Methuselah and his running buddies know it. It gets evoked during faculty hires on a regular basis, particularly senior faculty hires, either to support or argue against a candidate. But what I find most valuable is that when we are being our reflective best as a faculty, it prods each of us to rethink our work and how it does or does not reflect the quest to combine faith and intellect in the preparation of leaders for church and world. Here is where the dancing mind is at its best. Now, I am passionate about this because we live in times where our country needs those of us trained in the religious disciplines to speak up and into and with the public realm. And we can do so in part through our own schools and the scholarship we do and share directly with the public, with our students, with our trustees or boards of advisors. We spend our time amassing an incredible amount of information, and yes, some of it is arcane, but much more of it is about some things that can actually help folk come to know other peoples and cultures, other forms of the religious, other ways of making meaning out of faith stances, other understandings of the social and moral order of life, other ways to understand sacred texts, and the list goes on and on. In other words, I believe that it is increasingly imperative that we engage religious discourses in the public realm, both in the United States and in international contexts, because we live in an increasingly polarized world and larger academic environment that can often be hostile to things religious. We cannot, as scholars and teachers of religion, absent ourselves from the public conversations we now have about religion. Many of us shudder at the simplistic and cartoonish characterizations we see and hear about religious worlds that we know are complex and nuanced. The work we can and do must provide ongoing resources and support for those of us who comment on the religious events of our day in the public sphere, and we all know how difficult that is to be quoted accurately. It enriches us as scholars, and it strengthens the ability of our various schools to provide pertinent, informed, accessible, and when appropriate, faithful information and resources to our students. The the communities in which we sit, and the various religious institutions our schools may be representative of and responsible to. Why this scholarship? Because people need it to help make sense out of the chaos and spinning top of wars we now live in as part of the mundane and everyday in far too many people's lives. Why this scholarship? Because we have some gifts and we just need to use them. Now, although I am heartened by much of what I see happening in theological education across the country, there is a side that is troubling and a challenge, particularly that which is done in the United States that can morph into intellectual hubris as global export, and is didactic detritus from sanctifying protestations that true knowledge is universal. As the old black woman who raised me used to say about such things, This ethics of knowing has extraordinary relevance as we unfold into a troubling 21st century with contested political races, massive voter registration drives that were countered with massive disenfranchisement, a war on terror that is going horribly wrong and seems to be ongoing, blazing internal conflicts in countries like Afghanistan, Colombia, Darfur, Iraq, the Ivory Coast, Georgia, Haiti, Kashmir, Kazakhstan, Nepal, the Philippines, Somalia, Sri Lanka, and Uganda. Broken levees, broken promises, broken economy, broken housing and mortgage industry, and the list keeps going. Genuine intellectual engagement learns from a wide variety of sources, and not solely from the echoes of our mind and intellect, or from our various social locations or disciplinary expertise. There's a big world of religion out there to study and to know, and I believe this is an exciting challenge for us should we accept it and to consider what we do and how we do it. This ethics of knowing has extraordinary mandate to recognize also profound signs of humanity. After an alarming decline, charitable giving is on the rise again in the United States. The response to the December 24 tsunami that devastated the region surrounding the Indian Ocean, the outpouring of private and corporate support to the victims of the devastation wreaked by broken and poorly designed and built levees in New Orleans, giving for research in medicine and the social sciences, endowing scholarships, support for museums and orchestra are a large part of this. And we should not miss that individual giving by living people accounts for 3/4 of the total charitable giving in the United States now. The epistemology of knowledge that is represented in theological education then is always contextual, always fraught with our best and worst impulses. It is never objective, it is never disinterested, no matter how many rational proofs we come up with to argue to the contrary. Scholarship that contributes to society recognizes this, embraces this, does not seek to obfuscate this, and recognizes the utter humanity of this, and then begin with the concrete of our humanity rather than in esoteric concepts abstracted from life that teach us or lure us into believing that it is better to live in an unrelenting ontological suicide watch rather than a celebration of the richness and responsibilities of what it means to be created in the image of God. For dancing minds, the challenges become integrity, consistency, and stubbornness, not objectivity as the sole marker of scholarly brilliance. These do not displace objectivity. No, they become part of our methodological toolkit as well, and are as valued as the call for objectivity, because there is much to be said for holding ourselves accountable, which is, I think, ultimately what these calls for objectivity in the religious disciplines are all about. We just forget that a serious and capricious God has a hand in creation. And our intellectual musings often forget God's laughing side. And this makes too much of what we do humorless and inept. When recognizing these things, we can do relevant scholarship, excellent teaching, and learning with dancing minds that point to the vital triumvirate of love, justice, and hope. We are then moving from concepts in hermeneutical, historical, pastoral, theoethical discourses to tools that demystify and deconstruct and turn to building and enlightening. Part of what is involved in crafting scholarship that will contribute to the academy and the lives of people beyond the library or our studies or our offices or our religious spaces is that we must think in more expansive ways than our disciplinary homes have often trained us to think with. Our intellect focused primarily on our scholarly navels, which is not a bad navel, but it's not the only navel. This is a tricky business because in doing so, we also will be challenging the Holy of Holies in many of our disciplines and reconfiguring the standards of excellence in them. I'm aware that this may be hard for many younger scholars and junior faculty to do while casting realistically concerned eyes to tenure and advancement issues and the very real concerns of family and survival. But I have come to the place in my career, actually I got there in the early 90s, but I have come to the place in my career where I think that too many of the standards of excellence in many of our disciplines in theological education are not only too low, they may well be irrelevant. So part of what I am asking us to consider is how does our scholarship figure into this? How can we together think through the ways to juggle the academy and the folks we face in the classroom each day as students and peers and the many folks that they bring to the classroom with them who are not seen, not heard, but intensely affected by what we say based on the work we do. Perhaps strategic schizophrenia is one answer, that we see our research and scholarship and ministries running on at least two parallel tracks, one that continually calls for our disciplines one that tries to continually call our disciplines into excellence and revelation, the other that has both feet firmly planted in the everydayness of living. In doing so, I think we learn to actually value the messiness of the earth's groaning to survive what we do to it as an active and engaging theological dialogue partner, and as the chief guide for the kinds of questions that should fuel what we can do, who absolutely must become public intellectuals engaged in justice seeking, justice making, and justice living through what we do. And you can put any word in there in substitution for justice that makes sense for your own theological categories, as well as how we think about it and research it. To do any less than this casts me back in time to that 1960s cocktail party in which Ralph Ellison, the author of Invisible Man, spoke in clipped deliberate syllables to his peers. Show me the poem, tell me the names of the opera, the symphony that will stop one man from killing another man, and then maybe, as he gestured toward the elegant bejeweled assembly with his hand that held a cut crystal glass of scotch, just maybe some of this can be justified. I'm relieved to say that I am not left in Ellison's condemnatory despair. Perhaps it is because I rather like coming from a signifying and unsettling population. What I am left with is a frustrating hope that does not immobilize but strategizes. However, I am incandescently clear that signification is arbitrary and frustrating. But I think that the critical engagement of dancing minds that signification can evoke can lead us into fruitful interdisciplinary conversations that helps us turn to the other side of hegemony. Because signifying is a tool that can confuse, redirect, or reformulate the discourses of domination that are often at the heart of what we inherit in far too much of religious scholarship. It is important to recognize that all of our disciplines in the academic study of religion have their own hegemonic edge, and when working well, makes tremendous contributions. But we are so much better at what we do when we begin to ask with colleagues in other disciplines and begin to explore questions, ideas, concepts, situations informed by another set of lenses that gives us new vistas to explore. What arrogance we commit when we allow the inadequacies of our training to determine what we can come to know and how. To tackle this is not a condemnatory judgment, but a challenge to keep growing our scholarship large. Interdisciplinary work is only now being taken seriously in some graduate programs, but it's been here at Chicago for years. Some think this is faddish or an inept scholarship. They don't know Chicago well. But having been raised in two interdisciplinary programs, both here and at Northwestern, and having spent my early years immersed in interdisciplinary team teaching at St. Paul School of Theology, I learned quickly that you can't do interdisciplinary work without a main discipline as your intellectual home. There's nothing to interdisciplinary if you don't have something to talk to or talk from. So I'm not arguing for an interdisciplinary toga party for our scholarship. I am suggesting that interdisciplinary work is crucial for those of us who are trying to open up the stuffy kitchens in our disciplines and invite all manner of folk to sit around the table. And to do so, we can use signifying as more than a clever language game. For in the hands of rigorous dancing minds, signification can debunk narrow and restricted scholarship masquerading as immaculate theological conceptions. Like the Gramscian chess moves of hegemony, it is very important just who is doing the signifying and why. Allowing our minds, our scholarship, to dance as we come to welcome new conversation partners, be they disciplinary or representative, not to control or dominate, but to allow the richness of insights and experiences beyond what we know and don't know, to fill our scholarship with deeper meaning, to beget more piercing analysis, to offer more trenchant critique, to be more relevant to the schools in which we work and the folks who are influenced by what we do in theological education, wherever they sit in their religious communities, and to develop skills and scholarships that help mitigate bravura spells of ignorance and arrogance that can be found even within the work of some of us trying to deconstruct and reconstruct our disciplines, if not our religious households and schools. Now, I have to pause to say that there is some irony in thinking through what those old folks taught me, because when I started working on that section of the lecture several months ago now, it dawned on me I am now as old as those old people. They look rather young right now, but it was just a moment of self-confession. According to Morrison, the dancing mind requires an intimate, sustained surrender to the company of my own mind as it touches another. She encourages us to offer the fruits of our imaginative intelligence to another without fear of anything more deadly than disdain. This is how we begin to take the first steps away from Du Bois's damning judgment that his study of history reveals the reoccurrence of the idea that evil must be forgotten, distorted, skimmed over. In my musings on what this means for all of our disciplines, all of our ministries, is to move toward intellectually dancing into a new future that is more vibrant, more life-bringing and giving, more welcoming, more humane, more alive with possibilities that engages others and ourselves. It is serious work. It is important work. It is necessary work. Thank you. Questions, responses? Yes, Alicia. This is a Yale moment.
Thank you so much for your talk and welcome and congratulations on all of the wonderful things that you're experiencing this week. I appreciated that early on you spoke about scholarship and how it should be linked to direct action. I know of your work in Brazil and a lot of your theological aims within the classroom. Given the current climate in today's religious society and discourse, what do you think liberation us today?
The question is, what do I think, given today's climate, what liberation theologies have to say to us today? The strength of liberation theologies, and they run a large gamut, is that they begin with a particular setting and situation and see the worlds there in that setting, or in those settings, not as social agenda, but as theological challenges. And that's an important shift to make, I think, because so often I see us thinking things like militarism, racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, theological war games as politics or as social agendas, and not as theological challenges. And I think if we begin, and I think this is what liberation theologies, and they're not the only theologies that do this, but I think if we begin where liberation theologies end, which is that challenge to put ourselves in creation and see the sacredness of life all around us, and the ways in which we are not lined up with that sacredness when we create and perpetuate forms of oppression, that's not only a social problem, that's a theological problem, that's a problem in which we are now moving definitively towards the garden and not towards the first steps of creation. So I think those things are still there. And I think that one of the good things about liberation thought is that if you're using it well, it never becomes irrelevant because it has to continually change with the social conditions that people are facing. For instance, when I was here in the early 70s, and on, this room was the library. It's a great library, but it got absorbed over at Regenstein, and it became a lecture hall. What would have happened if there had been such a hold to keep this the library and not open it up to a kind of space where you can have open discourse about a variety of things? I keep track of what goes on at the Divinity School and the lectureships. There's a whole potpourri of things that happen in this room as folks talk about it. Well, that kind of movement to stay contextual and rigorous in scholarship is something that I do think that liberation theologies do, and I also think they can provide an ongoing challenge to the church. I was having email correspondence with Mary Hunt, who is a faithful Roman Catholic dissenter. And she was sort of pulling out her hair in only Mary Hunt can around the Pope's visit and the sort of love fest that kicks up when the aura of the Pope hits people. So her response was to come up with a song about the Pope to take me out to ball game. And I didn't memorize it, but it was a way in which it grounds us, it challenges us to not get so caught up in ecclesiastical glamour that we don't continue to recognize the challenges and the problems and the real sin that is going on in many of our denominations. The Roman Catholic Church doesn't have the market on this one. And so it's that kind of way of constantly engaging the world around us, the people in us, helping our scholarship move into that world and bring the best of that scholarship. Because I don't want to in any way be heard as saying I am damning rigorous scholarship. You know, one of the many gods that swirl around this place with the angels would probably hit me with a lightning bolt if I said that. That's just not how I was trained in, nor do I believe it. But I think that there's been a shift, at least for me, over the years in how I think about that. Other questions? Yes?
Just
emphasized under, in terms of her speaking, the intellectual hubris for global export. I wonder how you feel about the appointment of Tony Blair to the Divinity School faculty at Yale, as a Yale alumnus myself.
Yeah, well, that happened without the faculty voting.
No, I wondered about that.
Yeah, that happened one day by announcement. Let's just say I find it interesting. Now, the thing about Blair's appointment, and what little we know about it so far, is that I've heard tell. See, this is how much we really know. A 3-year appointment. He's not there for 3 years. The security can't handle being around every day. So he will come in every few weeks or so to teach a class of Miroslav Volk. Now that already says something theologically about the slant of how he sits within the Divinity School. And there are some of us who are trying to figure out ways to broaden that conversation and to ask our questions about it. My attitude is, when a done deal is done, the only thing you can do is figure out how to be subversive. And the dean knows that feels good too, so I thought that would turn. Other questions? Yes?
I know that Bell was taught at Yale for some time, and I was reading from her writing where she wasn't exactly happy with the relationship that she felt the African American professors had with one another. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, the question is, when Bell Hooks taught at Yale for a number of years, and in some of her writing, she has talked about the problematic nature she saw between African American faculty and actually African faculty too, with each other. What's the update on that? Basically.
Well, no. Do you have any? Right, exactly. Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
I do. I'm the director of undergraduate studies for African American studies, so I see my colleagues in FM once a week in intimate contact. And I would say that there's not that many black faculty at Yale to begin with, but there's a bigger tent than there used to be from what I understand. And you have to look at Yale in a two-step. There's actually a three-step. New Englanders are not warm and fuzzy. Just not that. Yale is steeped in the New England tradition, so it's rather cold and austere. When you arrive as a black faculty who was not raised up in Yale as an undergraduate and graduate student, it's culture shock. Because, I'm looking around going, these people have no home training. But the challenge for me was to figure out the culture of how one is. And what I discovered is, and this is true for anybody across the board, if you are new, you can't wait for those who have been there to welcome you. You have to go welcome yourself to them. It's a bizarre thing, but that's the struggle. So I figured that out, luckily, fairly quickly, and I had a few people who would break the rules and tell me what it's supposed to be, because Yale is a very big oral culture. It's really not that far away from being an all-men's school, where there is that sort of old boys network very much there, so everybody just sort of knows. And so what I'm seeing now, and I didn't appreciate it until a couple of weekends ago, we had a big conference on Black religion in the African diaspora. Was there, and it was just a whole nother thing stepped off. But one of my colleagues in FM said, it's changed. That we are now engaging one another in productive ways. And I think that's true. I enjoy my time with my black colleagues. And I'm told that's a new thing. I think over the years that will make FM a stronger department because we're learning how to not only be in our separate little fiefdoms, but also work together as a department. And so that becomes the spinning top for the other relationships around the university. The other thing the university is realizing, and this is from President Levin, is that he has now a 2-year-old call for diversity and has now hired a diversity officer and has had the first retreat for the officers of the university and the deans of the college and the graduate school and professional schools and staff members who have 8+ faculty and supervise. That happened last week was the first meeting. And there is a sense now that things have to change in the ethos. Because what is happening, which happens at any school, is if you don't treat people well, they leave. Then it doesn't matter how much you pay. And so the fact that there were so many junior black faculty who have left in the last 2 to 3 years for places that may not even be more humane, but they make more sense. That has caused some real consternation and some rethinking on how we are together. My hope is that it continues. I think we're in the process of deciding who will be the next department chair. If the person who gets it is the person I hope who gets it, I think that would help a lot in changing the culture of the department. And then the last piece that's been put in place in the last year are affinity groups in the university. So there's African American, there's Latino Latina, there's LGBTQI, there's several in which their groups have ongoing contact across the university in social settings just to get to know each other. So that we don't always see each other when there's an agenda. So ambling along, certainly not there. And for me, I'm reaping the benefits of the work that is done before, so I don't find it to be that onerous. In fact, I'm not glad. It's almost a sleep. It's, I never take for granted that it will stay there. I think it takes hard work. That's it.
Emily, it's my pleasure. Yeah, you're supposed to be over here. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's okay. You can do anything you want. This is a pleasure and a privilege for me to present this to you. It says, for her scholarship instrumental in the development of womanist theology, for teaching that brings the historic and present-day insights of African American women into critical conversation with Christian tradition, for her work as an American Baptist clergywoman who links race, gender, and class to such issues as healthcare, economic justice, poetry, and linguistic theory, the Baptist Theological Union names Emilie M. Town's Alumna of the Year 2008. Congratulations. Thanks for coming today. Oh, sure. We have.
I would have never thought this in '77 when I started here. So thank you.
I want to thank all of you for coming here. There's a reception now in the common room on the first floor to which you're all cordially invited. Good wishes. Hope to see you downstairs.
We thank you for listening to or viewing our podcast. For more information and for other podcasts, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts. Copyright, the University of Chicago Divinity School.